What's up, guys? Welcome to Movie Emporium. If you like what you see, of course, hit the subscribe button, join Movie Emporium, hit that notification bell at the top to find out what's coming next, and of course, comment below on any video that you're watching my channel. We made it to the end of 2019, folks. This has been a very interesting year. When this year started out, I'm like, this is not going to be very good. There's not a lot of great movies coming out. But I was talking to a few YouTubers that I usually talk to on a regular basis, and I'm like, I was looking through the last half of 2019, and I'm like, oh my god, this year is going to be insane. And I'll tell you what, that's exactly what this year was. 2019 as a whole was one of the best years of the decade or of the last, 20 years. It seems like every time there's a 19 or a 9 in the year, it turns out to be a fantastic year, or every 20 years, kind of like it just happens to be a great year for movies, and it's makes it so hard to make a top 10 list that it just becomes almost impossible to put every film that I really enjoyed in this top 10, because there's so many good films. You guys are going to be shocked and probably upset with my honorable mentions, but it is what it is. But my top 10 is eclectic, it's interesting, and it doesn't include any big budget movies, which is really funny. So, but we'll do 5 honorable mentions, and those honorable mentions are Honey Boy, the Shia LaBeouf movie. The next one is Ford vs Ferrari, the James Mangold movie. The next one is A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, the Tom Hanks movie. The next one is the one I just saw recently, Marriage Story. Fantastic film with Scarlett Johansson and Adam Driver. And this is the one that I know a lot of people will disagree with, Avengers Endgame. It's in my honorable mention. It's a great film, but just couldn't crack my top 10 because of how insane this year was. But I understand if it is in your top 10. So those are honorable mentions. Definitely see them if you get a chance, if you haven't seen any of those movies, which I know most of you have. And with that, let's go ahead and hit into number 10 of my top 10 of the year. And number 10 is... So how do you get over something like Star Wars The Last Jedi, the divisiveness of it? You create a whodunit, fun comedy, drama, whatever you want to call it, with Knives Out. And that's exactly what Rian Johnson did. He, with this film, he created a very fun, very outlandish tale of this family whose father has been murdered, or think he's murdered. And they're there to inherit his wealth. And there's a lot of mystery behind it. There's a lot of craziness behind it. But it has some great characters in it. We have Ana de Armas, we have Daniel Craig, we have Jamie Lee Curtis, Don Johnson, Chris Evans. The list goes on, and the eventual reveal makes this movie just fantastic and just a fun time at the theaters. And that's all I want out of it. Movies like this. Look at the Murder on the Orient Express. It's a great movie, and it's definitely recommended. That's why it's in my top 10, because it's just a good time at the theater. So there you go. With number 9, we have... So Taika Waititi directed Jojo Rabbit, and this movie was a very controversial movie when it was talked about, and there's a reason for that. Taika Waititi's playing Hitler, but this movie's fantastic. Like I said in my review, this movie has Roman Griffith-Davies in it, who's awesome, a breakthrough performance. Archie Yates is fantastic. We have Scarlett Johansson doing something completely different. Taika Waititi is, dressed up as Hitler, and like the most audacious thing I've ever seen, but it works really, really well. And then Sam Rockwell, Alfie Allen. This movie just, for what its material is doing and the way it's able to balance everything, it just makes it one of the great best films of the year. And there's a reason why I enjoyed it so much. I walked in, I walked out, I was anticipating it, and it exceeded all expectations. So Jojo Rabbit, definitely high on my list at top number 9. So anyways, we'll go ahead and head into number 8, which is... So this is a movie I can imagine is probably not on a lot of people's list as top 10 of the year. Gaspar Noé's Climax is a film that kind of completely just came out of nowhere with a movie that just completely surprised me. This movie's not easy. It's uncomfortable. It's brutal. It's dark. It deals with people getting laced with LSD. But the camera movements, the way you follow these people, the things that are happening in this movie, it becomes an exercise in just complete, well-known, diverse filmmaking, in the way we see shots of just the characters just kind of dancing for 10 minutes. Gaspar Noé is not known for his easy filmmaking, but when this movie goes from its like slow pace to its completely out of control pace in the climax, it was something truly special. And it's why I like theater movies and cinema so much, is because of films like this. So definitely check it out. Like I said, it's very hard to watch, but it's something I definitely recommend if you're willing to, experience it. So, but at number 7, we have... So Mike Finnegan has proved once again that he's one of the best horror directors on the market. He directed Doctor Sleep, which is with Ewan McGregor as Danny Torrance, the adult version. This movie I was anticipating. I was really looking forward to it because I love the book and I like Mike Finnegan a lot. I liked how this cast was set up, but what surprised me is how good Rebecca Ferguson is as the villain as Rose the Hat. She is on another level of anybody in this movie, and it's the reason why Rebecca Ferguson is just an amazing actress. And I said in my review, she's in a sequence with Kaylee Curran, who plays Abra. That is literally one of my favorite sequences of the decade. It's so well shot and just kind of inventive that I love it for it. And it's a sequel to The Shining, which I wasn't a huge fan of the Stanley Kubrick version, but I respect it. And this movie's awesome. So at number 7 is definitely Doctor Sleep. Check it out if you haven't seen it. So at number 6 we have. So this is a movie that came out in 2018. I didn't get to see it until 2019. People question why I put this on my list of 2019. It's because of that reason. If Beale Street Could Talk is a movie that came out in January for me, the movie just completely blew me away. It's fantastic. I think it's Barry Jenkins' best film, and it has a great performance by Regina King. But something I didn't mention in the original review that I did for this movie is there's a sequence, kind of like in Doctor Sleep, where Brian Tyree Henry explains about life in prison, and it's one of the most brutally honest, crazy things I've ever seen in film. He should have gotten an Oscar nomination for that particular scene because he's so raw, he's so emotional, but he's so good at telling his story that you just kind of become enveloped and engrossed in it. And it's just a brutally honest, scene, and you're just watching the characters, sit there and listen. And on top of that, it's a story about somebody who's wrongfully and convicted of something, and the love that people share, and it comes to a brutally sad climax. But if you haven't seen If Beale Street Could Talk, it has also an amazing score, which I don't even know if I talked about that because it's been so long. But just check it out; it's definitely worth watching. So, but that's at number 6. So number 5 is. So Lulu Wang's The Farewell was a movie that I have been looking forward to based off the trailer I had seen. It came out of nowhere for me, and it's a fantastic movie. This, of course, is a very true story about Lulu Wang basically not being able to tell her grandmother because of the culture that she lives in, that she has a terminal cancer or terminal disease or whatever it is. And Shuzhen Zhao and Aquafina are the standouts of this movie. Like I said, Shuzhen Zhao should get an Oscar nomination as the grandmother because she's so good in the role. And Aquafina, who is usually like outlandish and crazy, is very toned down, and her performance is fantastic. But if you haven't seen The Farewell, definitely give it a watch. It will touch your soul and touch your heart, and it's just a fantastic movie. So yeah, at number 5 we have The Farewell, and number 4 we have. So this is a film I wish was in everybody's top 10. The Last Black Man in San Francisco, which is directed by Joe Talbot and written by Jimmy Fails, who's one of the actors in this movie, and Joe Talbot, is kind of showing what San Francisco has turned into compared to what it used to be. We're given a different side of San Francisco that we never really see in movies, which I talked about in my review. And it's just a beautiful movie. It's a movie that completely took me by surprise at how good it was. And Jonathan Majors, who is kind of like a poet in this movie, and he's been in other stuff before. It's a breakthrough performance for him. And this movie it's raw, it's emotional, and it shows a person that's really not willing to accept the fact of what's happening to San Francisco, or what's happened to San Francisco. And I just like the fact that we get to see things that we don't usually see. And on top of that, this movie it's an amazingly written movie. It's a fantastic movie. It was number 1 on my top 10 list for a while until some other movies came out. But please see Last Black Man in San Francisco because it is definitely not a waste of your time. So there you go. Number 3, we have. So we have The Irishman. Irishman, of course, Martin Scorsese's mega long opus. This movie is once again brings back Robert De Niro and thank God Joe Pesci into the fold of a Martin Scorsese movie, and it gives us Al Pacino too, which is really cool. This movie is great. It's fantastic. It's brutal. It's violent. It's a Martin Scorsese movie, but it's a Martin Scorsese movie at its finest. And yes, it's long, but it's deliberately long on purpose, and it gives us character exposition. It gives us moments. It gives us, quietness, and just gives us the life of this character. The Irishman himself, played by Robert De Niro, and it's fantastic. Joe Pesci is going to get an Oscar nomination for this role. I hope Al Pacino or maybe Robert De Niro does as well. But once again, with Thelma Shoemaker, it shows that Martin Scorsese is just he's in command of every movie he ever does, and he's allowed to do these movies now because he has such a eclectic career. So, but at number 3 we have The Irishman. So we'll head to number 2, which is. I didn't realize Trey Edward Schultz directed It Comes at Night. That I didn't care for at all, which was surprising. Waves, on the other hand, broke me in pieces. This movie is brutal. This movie is honest. This movie is insane. And it takes place in Miami, where I currently live, like I said. Taylor Russell, who plays like the main girl in this movie, dealing with the situation at hand. She's fantastic. I wish she would get an Oscar nomination. I hope Sterling K. Brown gets an Oscar nomination. I hope this movie just gets all the accolades outside of another movie I'm going to talk about in a second. This movie is rough and it's hard, and I cried several times, but this movie it's cathartic. It's amazing. And like Marriage Story, it has hope at the end of this movie. But man, it is a journey that you have to be prepared for, and you have to bring tissues, and you have to understand that this movie is not easy, and there's a reason why it's called Waves and the ripple effects of our life. So yeah, number 2 is Waves. It's pretty crazy. So with that, you guys should know what my number 1 film is if you watch my review for it. But number 1 we have. So in 2018, I talked about how Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse was my favorite film of the year just because of how revolutionary it was for animation. There always seems to be one film every year that kind of does that, where it just kind of changes the genre, or at least once every decade that kind of does that. With 1917 and what Sam Mendes and Roger Deakins did with the one-shot, genre, this movie is revolutionary in what it's doing. Yeah, it's not original because it's about saving people's lives, but for a war movie, for the tense nature of what Sam Mendes was doing, for how it's shot with being up and close with these guys, they never know what's around the corner. You don't know what's around the corner. You never leave their side. It's an incredible piece of work, an incredible piece of cinema. It is going to be with me for the rest of my life with how good it really is. And then you got Thomas Newman's incredible score. You got Jordan McKay's incredible performance. You got all these famous actors in this movie that are not really in it that much. And it just becomes a wholly unique cinema experience. And it's such a shame that this movie is not coming out till January 10th for most people, because it needs to be seen. It needs to be experienced. Go see it at the biggest theater you can, because like Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, this movie completely changes how cinema really is. And I can't wait to see what other people do with this technology. Alfonso Cuarón kind of like jump started this one shot, even though, other movies have done this. But Alfonso Cuarón kind of really brought it into the mainstay. But Sam Mendes, like with what he's done before, Road to Perdition or, Skyfall or something like that. I mean, what can you say? It's an incredible film. Definitely is my top, film of the year. And if you watch my, best of the decade, it's in my best of the decade as well. But 1917 is insane and it's incredible. So there you go. At number 1, 1917. So there you go, guys. That is my top 10 with a few honorable mentions. I know a lot of people probably won't agree with the list. Avengers Endgame is a little high on a lot of people's lists, which is cool. Joker's not in there. Parasite's not in there. It's just the way it works out. It's the way the year works out. There's some films that I love to death, but they just didn't make it. So anyways, let me know in the comments below what your top 10 is. I'd be really interested to know. Also, link if you do have a top 10 video, I'd be interested to watch it because I do like top 10 videos. Also, hit the subscribe button, join Movie Emporium, hit that notification bell at the top to find out what's coming next, and of course, comment below on any video that you watch my channel. Otherwise, we'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out. What's up, guys? Welcome to Movie Emporium. If you like what you see, always hit the subscribe button, join Movie Emporium, hit that notification button at the top to find out what's coming next, and of course, comment below on any video that you watch on my channel. So I hope you've enjoyed my best of the year 2019 video. I know a lot of people probably disagree with my order and not putting Avengers Endgame in my top 10, but you know it is what it is. This is a video I know everybody loves to death. It's the worst of worst of whatever year. Of course, it's worst of 2019. I'm not the biggest fan of doing this video, but because I don't like ragging on movies, but it's a fun video to do. A lot of people like it, so you know what? I'm gonna do it. There's only two honorable mentions this time because this year was actually pretty great for what it's worth. But with that said, those honorable mentions are the Goldfinch and Brightburn, which were in my top 10 at one point, but other films came out. So congratulations, Goldfinch and Brightburn. You are no longer in the top 10 worst, but you're still pretty bad. So, but with that said, let's go ahead into number 10, which is. So Neil Jordan directed The Crying Game, which is a actually great film. It has a great twist to it. It has a great all around cool thing to it. He directed Greta, which had Chloe Grace Moretz, Isabelle Huppert in it. This movie's weird. It's not very good. It has some really over the top stuff going on in this movie. Isabelle Huppert is just in a different movie than Chloe Grace Moretz, but this movie's tone and its deftness and its feel and where it goes is just completely uncomfortable and just unnecessary. And the movie's just not very good either. It just does some weird things. It's like I said, Isabelle Huppert's character is just I don't know what's going on. And then Chloe Grace Moretz she's much better for as an actress than what she is doing in here. But yeah, this movie is just not good. It's not fun. It's not entertaining, and to me, it's one of the worst movies of the year. So there you go. At number 10, we have Greta. Number 9, we have. So Serenity was actually in my most anticipated movies. I love the trailer for it. I like Matthew McConaughey and Hayes. They're fantastic actors and actresses. I don't know what happened with this movie. This movie is directed by Stephen Knight, who actually did stuff like Locke and All the Pretty Things and Easter Promises and Peaky Blinders. And this movie is just weird. There's a domestic abusive situation. There's video game stuff going on in this movie. And it's not at all what I was expecting. And it was made worse for every decision that was made in this movie. And there's probably a reason why it was released in January and pushed back like it was. But I had hope for it. And I came out of this movie just more disgusted when I washed my hands after it. So it's not a very good movie. Not very good performances by Matthew McConaughey and Anne Heche, who are trying, and Jason Clark's in this movie, and it's not a very good movie. So, and unfortunately, made my top 10 worst of the year, which is kind of disappointing. So, at number 9 is Serenity, and at number 8 we have. So talk about going out on a whimper. X-Men Apocalypse had already done that, but then we kind of put salt on the wound and come out with Dark Phoenix. Listen, I don't hate Simon Kinberg. He did Rebels. He did a bunch of good stuff with with the X-Men franchise as well as Star Wars. But this movie's not good. It's weird. The characters are off. Mystique. Jennifer Lawrence's character dies just needlessly, and it brings in Jessica Chastain, but it brings in once again Michael Fassbender and James McAvoy, Jennifer Lawrence, Nicholas Hoult. It brings a bunch of characters I really don't care about anymore, and it kind of just ruined the franchise. I mean, leave it alone after X-Men Apocalypse and Logan, but this was a cash grab, and this is a movie that kept getting pushed back because of the bad buzz and bad things and that was talked about in this movie. And on top of that, you're ruining the Dark Phoenix saga again for the second time. And this movie is it's weird, it's disgusting, and it makes me really upset for a franchise I consider the linchpin for what the superhero movie is today. So yeah, Dark Phoenix is not a good movie, and it's definitely one of the worst of the year. So at number 8 is Dark Phoenix, and at number 7 we have. So I really don't care who directed this movie, but this is Marlon Wayne's blank check movie, and it's Sextuplets. This is the third movie in the Netflix catalog that is on this list. This movie is offensive. This movie is disgusting. This movie makes no sense. It's trying to be the Nutty Professor, but more raunchy. And Marlon Wayans, who I love to death, I think is funny as hell, is awful in this movie. The different characters he's playing are just gross stereotypes. And this movie is just not funny. There's nothing funny about it. It's just, Marlon Wayans trying to do funny for funny's sake. And it's so off of what it's trying to do that it doesn't feel like a good movie. And it's one of those movies where I question, where is the control in Netflix? And when you see with The Irishman, they're giving people blank check movies, and this is what the kind of product you're gonna get with these blank check movies. There's no constraint, and Sextuplets is the prime example, or at least one of the prime examples of this problem. So at number 7 is sextuplets, and at number 6 we have. So I said it in my Cats review. This is not a good year for Ian McKellen. This movie, The Good Liar, had a promising 2/3 to it. It's directed by Bill Condon. It has Helen Mirren and it has Ian McKellen. But then the last third of this movie happens in that reveal, and I don't want to talk about it because I hate talking about it. It's disgusting. It completely ruins the movie and just makes it an awful experience. I was really into this movie when it was dealing with like the cons and how Ian McKellen's just a slime ball of a character, and then we started learning about Helen Mirren's past, and it angered me because I was really into it, and I had to put it on my worst of the year because it's just an awful way to represent a movie. And I don't care if it's based off a book. There's better ways to kind of reveal this stuff, and maybe just not maybe do it something different, maybe kind of give it a different edge to it. But when you're doing the kind of stuff that this movie ends up doing, I can't be on board with it. It's kind of manipulative in a lot of ways. So number 6 is the Good Liar, and it's such a shame it's on my list, but it's terrible. So, but at number 5 we have. So I said at number 6, Ian McKellen's not having a good year. I just saw this movie. I just literally just talked about it. Cats, directed by Tom Hooper, has a great cast in it. This movie's just weird and disturbing. I don't know what they were thinking. The visual effects on the cats are awful. The plot, the fact there's no plot. I know it's part of the play and musical, but come on, when you're writing something like this, when you have a writer, why don't you add some story to it? Give it a little bit more meat to the bone, because some of the music in here is actually quite good, but when you have like meaningless points and you're just like introducing characters that disappear, and then you have Idris Elba as the villain, which is awesome, and you kind of meander his whole story arc, it's just not a very good movie. It just, when you have to base it off the songs alone, and when you're kind of basing off material kind of like Phantom of the Opera and Jesus Christ Superstar, which actually had plots and kind of moving structure to it, I just don't feel like I feel like this was such a missed opportunity in the budget Tom Hooper got. And I'm starting to worry about Tom Hooper's directorial career, because I like Les Miserables a lot. I definitely like King's Speech a lot, but it just seems like he wasn't able to handle the weight of this material as the 4th longest running Broadway play. So yeah, it's a terrible movie with terrible acting, terrible direction, and it's just an awful movie. So at number 5, unfortunately, is Cats, and at number 4 we have. So in the beginning of this year, I saw Replicas, and Replicas I actually really enjoyed the first time I saw it. It's stupid, it's cheesy. I was like, whatever. I like Keanu. Thomas Middleditch is in this. It's fine. But then I watched it again, and yeah, this movie's not good. It's trying to be something that just doesn't work. The whole idea that his family has been killed and he replicates them, and just see how that plays out. The fact that they use like the 6-day material, and it's like a haphazard trying to kind of convey a message about replication and keeping people alive who are dead. And it just completely falls flat. This is in the same vein as like Knock Knock with Keanu Reeves. It's not good. It's actually quite awful, and it doesn't make any sense. And it's such a shame because Keanu Reeves is in that great Keanu songs right now. So it's unfortunate, but it is a January movie. So anyways, number 4 is Replicas, and number 3 we have. I know a lot of people like this movie. It's fine. It's one of the Stephen King movies adaptations, at least, I hate. It's In the Tall Grass. This is the second of 3 movies from Netflix. This isn't a constraint movie because it's very low budget, and you can tell. I just don't like the direction of this movie. I don't like what Patrick Wilson was doing. I don't like anything about it. I think it had a cool setup with like the fact that these people go into this cornfield, and then time just kind of becomes manipulative. But it gets confusing. It gets plotting. It becomes over the top, and it's shows you sometimes some of the worst parts about what Stephen King does in his material. And I love Stephen King to death. I love everything about it. Doctor Sleep was one of my favorite movies this year, but I just don't think this movie works. It's in that vein of just like horrible horror films that just I'll never watch again. And it's such a shame because it's an interesting concept, like Children of the Corn or something like that. But for a supernatural tale, I didn't like it. I didn't think it was good, and that's why it's in my worst of the list. So number 3 is In the Tall Grass, and at number 2 we have. So how do you get an animated movie, get a gigantic cast, and squander that? You do Wonder Park. This movie has the moments of your parent is sick and she's inventing this whole Wonder Park basically. I mean, it's in her imagination. And that's a cool setup, but it's been done a million times before, and you can tell this was cheaply done. You know, the director got taken off the project for reasons, and it's just not a very good movie. It's actually quite awful. It's, you know, the characters in this movie, the actors and actresses that are playing the different animals, young girl, nothing fits. It kind of goes wonky all over the places. The structure, the editing, everything about it just it doesn't work, and it just feels like a haphazard attempt to create something wholly unique from, I think this is from Nickelodeon or something like that. But you start to see problems, and you can start to see why, you know, DreamWorks or Pixar or any of these production companies like are really above the whole, because these are like dumpster fire movies that just get put out. You see anime movies, especially low budget, all the time, and it's just why these movies keep getting through. I know it's all about making money, but this movie bombed as well, and it just Wonder Park is not good. I never recommended it, and there's better animated films. So at number 2 is Wonder Park, terrible. And that finally reaches to number 1, which, if you know me, you know how angry I got with this movie. You know what it is. So at number 1 we have. Directed by Mick G, written by Zach Stentz, and about a group of kids who are running through the apocalypse. Rim of the World completely just, I was actually kind of looking forward to, because I do kind of like Mick G in his direction. He's not the greatest director in the world, but he has moments. This movie is just pure awfulness. This movie should have never been made. This is at the point where I just question what Netflix was even doing. Thank God we had like Irishman and Marriage Story and The Two Popes coming out. But this movie just, it feels like a scrabbled together mess that doesn't make any sense. It has so many issues, so many problems. You know, the characters and the kids are awful. The point where they get to their eventual conclusion is awful. You know, everything just doesn't, it feels like a sad attempt to ape off a kids movie like The Goonies. And then the kids are just using non-consonant language. And, you know, I know, you know, these 80s kids movies did that, but it just, I was so befuddled watching this movie. I was, you know, watching them going, is there, am I just seeing something that not a lot of people are seeing? I got a lot of crap for this movie for hating it as much as I did, but this movie is just, it's literally one of the worst movies of the year. It actually is the worst movie of the year to me. It's not as bad as Slender Man, because that is the worst movie of the decade, but yeah, Rim of the World is not good. It's such a shame, because, you know, I've seen the director and the writer like defend this movie, which is awesome, but I can't get behind this movie. I just really can't. I just feel like screaming every time I talk about this movie because it's so awful. So yeah, the worst movie of the year to me personally, Rim of the World. So anyways, that is going to do it for my top 10 worst of the year. It makes me a little disheartened when I talk about top 10. I'm going to be honest. Like, you can see my like face kind of draining away, but it is what it is. It's a fun list to do because, you know, you can talk about movies that are just awful and people can avoid them, and you can have a good time. And I'm really interested, like I said, when I go to my comments, but, you know, tell me what what you think is the worst movie of the year. I'd be interested to know. But there you go. That is the top 10 worst of the year for Movie Emporium. So if you like what you see, of course, like I said, comment below. Let me know your worst movie of the year. As always, hit the subscribe button, join Movie Emporium, hit that notification bell at the top to find out what's coming next, and we'll see you guys on the next video. Peace out. What's up, guys? How you doing? Welcome to Movie Emporium's Best of the Decade. I hope you guys are having a great day. If you guys like what you see, hit the subscribe button, join Movie Emporium, hit that notification bell at the top to find out what's coming next, and of course, comment below on any video that you watch on my channel. So it's pretty crazy to think that we're officially through another decade of the 2000s. There's been a lot of great films in this decade, so many that not only have I forgotten about films, but it's just impossible to make a list for the top, 10 films of the decade. I mean, think about that. 10 years, hundreds upon thousands of movies have been released, but you have to make a list somehow, or you have to find a way to break these movies down to why they're most important to you, especially in the decade, because these are movies that are the cream of the crop, will stand the test of time, and are just fantastic movies. But the problem with this list is everybody's going to be different, and not everybody's going to agree with your list. Actually, 99% of the people will not agree with your list because it's completely different than what they believe. But, I had fun doing it. I've been kind of counting down what I think are my top 10, also 5 honorable mentions, which I mentioned. But just remember, this is my opinion. So the first honorable mention, of course, is Source Code, which is directed by Duncan Jones. Fantastic film. The next one is Edge of Tomorrow, which is one of my favorite sci-fi action films of the decade. The next one is Boyhood, which is so close to getting into my top 10 because I love that movie so much. The next one is Looper, Ryan Johnson's fantastic sci-fi time travel film that had Bruce Willis in it. And the last one is The Martian, which is Ridley Scott, Matt Damon movie, which I thought was fantastic. So those are 5 films that just barely missed out of the top 10. Like I said, this decade is stacked with great movies, as it always is. So doing a top 10 like that is really hard to do, but these films are definitely ones I recommend, just missed the top 10. So, but with that said, let's go into the top 10, which I'm sure will be controversial for most people. So number 10 is Alex Garland has been one of those like up and coming writers for the longest time. He's worked with Danny Boyle on stuff like Sunshine and 28 Days Later. He's developed a great career. It's a fun thing to watch. What he has done, what he has become in the sci-fi genre, and that's why Ex Machina is number 10 on my list. Ex Machina kind of just blew me away that year. The year it came out, I think it was like 2015 or something like that. It was a movie that had Domhnall Gleeson and Oscar Isaac pre Star Wars, the Last Jedi, Force Awakens, and it's a movie about artificial intelligence and how taking artificial intelligence can become a problem where the Deus Ex Machina comes into effect. And everybody in this movie is just on point. This is Alex Garland's best film to date. It's just an amazing film to watch. Then you got Alicia Vikander, who just came out of nowhere and is fantastic in this movie. She is, beautiful. You feel for her, but she kind of has a sinister side to her. But it shows you the kind of the cautionary tale of what technology and AI advancement in technology can do, and that's why it's such a great film. So at number 10, it's not a shady spot. It's a great spot to be at, but there's like 9 other films, but Ex Machina, fantastic film, one of the best of the decade. So number 9 is it's a fascinating movie that I had no interest in watching. I love David Fincher to death. I think Aaron Sorkin's one of the best writers in Hollywood. But a movie about Facebook, a movie called The Social Network, I mean, come on, who thought that movie was going to be any good? Well, I was completely wrong. This movie is not only great, but it's one of the best of the decade, just on pure acting and writing and tense nature. Jesse Eisenberg is playing Mark Zuckerberg. Andrew Garfield is in this movie, who got like criminally robbed of an Oscar nomination. Justin Timberlake is at his finest. Rooney Mara just shows the acting chops that she has. Justin Marzella, just anybody in this movie, and just the building nature, and just the Armie Hammer as the twins is fantastic. This movie just builds upon what is a very disturbing nature of technology and keeps building and building and building to a point where it just completely implodes and explodes upon itself. And there's so much good stuff in here. Aaron Sorkin's dialogue is just mind-blowingly good. Just watch the first scene of this movie as soon as it starts, and you know what you're getting yourself into. So, Social Network, number 9 on my list, one of the best of the decade. So, number 8 is so when we get into Christopher Nolan, you can cherry pick any movie that he's ever done, maybe outside of Dark Knight Rises, which a lot of people don't like, and just get something uniquely whole and just completely different out of him. And that's why Inception is on this list. This movie is unlike anything I've ever seen before. This movie is powerful, it's dark, it's interesting, it's scary. They're dealing with Inception, which is going into the people's minds to kind of plant seeds. The way it's layered, how it just completely collapses upon itself each time it's layered. And it's not confusing at all when you're watching. You're watching and you're actually able to follow everything because of how well it's constructed. And then on top of that, you got Leonardo DiCaprio, you got Michael Caine, you got Ellen Page, you got Ken Watanabe, Tom Hardy, Joseph Gordon-Levitt. There's other people in this movie, but you just got this amazing cast that was able to concoct something that is so riveting. When they go into like the lower depths of the Inception, and you're actually seeing the different levels and how they're responding to time, it's an amazing thing to watch, and is one of Christopher Nolan's best. And you've seen it, everybody saw it. It's a great, fantastic film. So it's one of the best of the decade. So at number 7, we have So in 2011, we had what I consider one of the most original horror films ever made, and it took forever for this movie to be released. That is, of course, Drew Goddard and Joss Whedon's Cabin in the Woods. Let me tell you what about this movie. This movie is something unique and something I've never seen before, like Inception. It takes the horror Cabin in the Woods or horror genre and deconstructs it into an amazing just look at the crazy and zaniness of the genre itself. You know, we have these five characters who are in this cabin in the woods, like a typical story, but they're being controlled by this underground facility. And the underground facility, we have, Richard Jenkins and Bradley Whitford and Sigourney Weaver, and then we have all these creatures in this elevator area, and we have Kristen Connolly and Chris Hemsworth before Thor and Franz Kranz, and this movie is just it's so well written, it's so well designed, it's so well paced, and it has so many great surprises. It has such a great payoff, especially when the Franz Kranz and Kristen Connolly go down in the elevator, and they open up and all the demons come out, and then you see all the creatures and they're so uniquely written, and there's so many great callbacks to different characters from like different other horror films. It's a movie that just stands on its own as something wholly unique and wholly terrifying. And when we get to the final conclusion, the decisions that are made completely upend any horror film I've ever seen in my entire life. And it's such a good film. I'm glad it was released, and I'm glad we have it. It's one of Joss Whedon and Drew Goddard's best films, so it's also one of the great films of the decade. So, anyways, we'll head into number six, which is 1917. Is a movie that literally I just saw like a couple weeks ago or a month ago or whatever this video post, and this movie is something that just completely blew me away. This is Sam Mendes' best film. There's no other film like this movie. I mean, that is in essence of what it's trying to do. You know, the one shot takes, the fact that Roger Deakins and his colors and his use of photography and how he's using it, the fact they're following George McKay and Dean Charles Chapman everywhere, the cast, Colin Firth, Benedict Cumberbatch, so on and so forth, and then Thomas Newman's score, the chaotic nature. This is the funny part about this war movie, is it seems like every 20 years or so, or every 10 years or so, whatever it is, we get a war film like this, or we get a film like this that completely changes the landscape of filmmaking in essence. And I want to put this movie higher, but there's so many good films that came out this year or in this decade. But this movie just stands above everything else I've seen in 2019 and of the decade. It's just everything this movie does, and just watch my review. But everything that this movie does, everything that how it plays out, the emotional impact that this movie has, and the resonance that this movie does in its nature of filmmaking, it just cannot not be stated how good this film is, and it definitely deserves a top 10 spot in my decade of the year or decade films. So definitely check it out when 1917 comes out. Hopefully it comes out soon for everyone. So yeah, at number six, 1917. So anyways, number five is, so in 2017 we have Logan. Logan is, it's a movie that is just remarkable. It's one of the best superhero movies ever made, and it takes a character that we've loved for at this point almost 20 years now with Logan, Wolverine, and completely upends the whole idea of who Logan and Wolverine is. He's the guy that we thought was indestructible, but here we got a character that's really old, that is having problems with his health, that is not recovering like he used to, can barely, he's having to take medicines, having to take drugs. He's weathered. It's one of the most amazing performances from Hugh Jackman, and it's such a shame he didn't get an Oscar nomination for this role because he's fantastic. The other crime of nature to not get an Oscar nomination is Patrick Stewart as Charles Xavier. The fact that his mental illness is like, his mind is going and he's losing his ability to remember anything. There's this, it's never shown, but it's insisted upon about how he killed all the X-Men because of his nature of his mental illness. It's one of Patrick Stewart's best performances of a character he's also done almost 20 years now. And the moments in this between him and Charles Xavier, between Hugh Jackman and Patrick Stewart, are just mind-blowingly good. And it's one of James Mangold's best films he's ever made. And it has Stephen Merchant, and it has the great Daphne King in this movie, who was like her first movie, and she's fantastic as the clone of Wolverine. And just the heartbreak nature and the sad but hopeful nature that this film presents, and the end of a character that we've come to love so much.
This movie is just brilliant. I'm so glad it at least got a script nomination because it's a fantastic just look at a superhero movie that's a deconstruction western, and it's great. So at number 5 is Logan. I'm sure a lot of people agree to how high that movie is, but yeah. So anyways, number 4 is 2014 brought Damien Chazelle in with a bang. He had done one other film prior to this, but it was like a short film or whatever. Whiplash is an amazing film. It's a film about passion. It's a film about the lengths we will go to do what we really truly love. And it brings in some of the most scary, most awe-inspiring performances from Miles Teller and J.K. Simmons. J.K. Simmons, especially, who won an Oscar for this movie. This movie is just heartbreaking to watch because people who are this passionate about anything will put hours upon hours into it, and the people that are driving these people are not always the most friendliest of people. You know, you look at Hollywood types, or you look at professors of music, or you just look at people in general who have like complete drives, and it will break you. It will put you in another realm of just despair. But when this movie ends and we get that fantastic drum solo at the very end, and we see the passion on Miles Teller's face, and we see the drive on J.K. Simmons' face, this movie just becomes a whole nother level of just insane movie making. And I wanted to put La La Land on this top 10, but because of what Whiplash did and what it does and how it presents and how these two characters just really mesh together, there's a reason that people love this movie. And it's a reason that it's such a great film. And Whiplash is just something that you need to watch to truly understand why this movie is so great. So at number 4 is Whiplash. And at number 3, we have Bob Perchetti, Peter Ramsey, and Rodney Rothman created a film called Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse with Phil Lord and Chris Miller. How can you not talk about this being the best of the decade? This movie is insane with its premise, but is insanely good with what it's doing. This movie brought me pure joy, pure tears, pure excitement, just pure everything. This movie is as good as it gets for a comic book movie. You know, I mentioned Logan earlier, but this movie is just on a whole nother level. This movie is one of the best animated movies ever made. This is one of the best, most creative things I've ever seen, and it creates a new level of animation that is tops everything I've ever seen. You know, one of my favorite movies is Toy Story, and this movie deserves a place right next to it as one of the most inventive films I've ever seen in my entire life. And on top of that, you know, you have like Shamik Moore playing Miles Morales. We've never seen Miles Morales before. We have, you know, Nicolas Cage playing Spider Noir. We have Haley Steinfeld playing Spider Gwen. It just keeps rolling and rolling, and it's just if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. But this movie, just the art style, the inventiveness, the use of the cell animation, the use of the blocks that they use in like comic books. It's just a creative film, and it deserves everything praise that it gets. And I'm so glad it won the Oscar for best animated film. But if you haven't seen this movie, if you haven't seen Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, please check it out because you will probably be as blown away as I was. So, but that's at number 3, and number 2 is Daniel Kaluuya, Allison Williams, Lakeith Stanfield, Bradley Whitford, Kathleen Keener, Lil Rat Howery, and Caleb Landry Jones. What did those all have in common? That's right, they were in the Jordan Peele movie Get Out. So I went to see Get Out because I was interested in what Jordan Peele was going to bring to the horror genre. He's mostly known for Key and Peele, which is a fantastic comedic variety special. But he's doing something completely different here. He's actually taking on the horror genre, which, as we know now, he's fantastic at doing. But at the time, we're like, so we have a comedic director who had just done Keanu, which wasn't a very good film. He's going to do a film about racist stereotypes and racism, and he's going to put it into a horror film about Invasion of the Body Snatchers. How is this going to work? And boy, howdy, not only does it work, but it works well. It's a fantastic film. Jason Blum with like Whiplash was one of the producers on this movie, and this is what makes Jason Blum the best producer on the market outside of the A24 crew. He was able to usher in with Jordan Peele something so wholly unique and something wholly special that it just watching this film as it kind of pieces itself together and kind of breaks down everything, you know, how it has like the different moments and different feels and different touches, and how it's playing, how Daniel Kaluuya is like very skeptical of everything with Kathleen Keener and Bradley Whitford, how Kathleen Keener is kind of manipulating him, how he's trying to like tell everyone what's going on. It's just, this movie is just there is oh my god, this movie is fantastic. I'm gonna talk about this movie eventually in one of my flashback reviews, but just the performances, you know, Daniel Kaluuya got an Oscar nomination for this, you know, Jordan Peele won an Oscar for the best screenwriting and got best picture. There's a reason for that. It's a touchstone, it's a milestone of the decade, it's a milestone of filmmaking, and it brings out a director and a writer who can do anything he wants now because he created such a phenomenal look into a different type of, you know, genre that he's never done before. And they got Stephen Root in this movie, which is even better. So, but there you go. That's number 2 with Get Out. Fantastic film. Us as well. Check that out as well. But anyways, so with number 1, this is it. This is the best film of the decade. It is not Slender Man, but that is the worst worst film of the decade. So, but number 1, best film of the decade is. So 2015 was an interesting year for movies. Ex Machina came out. You know, like I said, that's my number 10 film. But no other film of this decade has done what Mad Max Fury Road did. And Mad Max Fury Road is going to be in a lot of people's number 1s because this movie melted my brain. And I said this in a Facebook post one time when I went to see this movie early. This movie is one of the best action movies ever made. There's no ifs, ands, and buts about it. This is one of George Miller's best movies. This is a movie that took action films to a whole new level of filmmaking. People wanted to copy this film, and it's almost impossible. There's no words to express how good this movie really is. Yes, it doesn't really have a story, and they're going back and forth. But you have Charlize Theron in this movie who should have gotten an Oscar nomination. I'm so glad this movie got the Oscar nominations it did, like Best Picture, because it definitely deserved it. You have Nicholas Hoult who plays Nux, and Nicholas Hoult should have gotten an Oscar nomination. Tom Hardy's in this movie as Mad Max, but he's not like the reason behind this movie. Is, you know, Furiosa with Charlize Theron. The action in this movie, the fact that most of 99% of it's live action, the races and the chases, you know, the movement with the cars, the fact that they got stunt people to do all this creative work. When, you know, you have the guy with the drums, you have the guy with the guitar, you have, you know, people flying back and forth. I think they got people from like Cirque du Soleil to be in this movie. This movie takes everything and just blows it out of proportion, blows it out of the water. This might be one of the greatest movies ever made. I don't know. It depends on how you feel. I personally feel it's like one of the greatest, at least action films ever made. And the ideas and concepts of what George Miller, who I think was in the 60s or 70s when he made this film, it just, you just can't not see this movie as what it is just a 5-star, 10 out of 10, 2 thumbs up, just pure joy of cinema and pure joy of action, pure joy of adrenaline, pure joy just of everything. And when I was thinking about doing this top 10 list, you know, as most people do, I'm like, what film defines this decade? What film really truly defines everything that is great about cinema and filmmaking? Because the 2010s are one of the, you know, the great decades, as we always know. And Mad Max is that film. You know, there's no other film like it. There's no other film that will be like it unless George Miller does another film in the Mad Max series, which I hope he does. But yeah, Mad Max Fury Road. If you haven't seen this movie, you need to see it, because even if you're not an action film, you'll enjoy the spectacle. You'll enjoy the pure audacity of this film. And it's just Mad Max Fury Road, one of the greatest film of the decade. So there you go. Yeah, that's it. That's my top 10 of the decade. So anyways, tell me what your favorite films of the decade are. It doesn't have to be a top 10. Tell me what your favorite film of the decade is. Is it Mad Max? Is it Get Out? Is it Ex Machina? Let me know. But that'll do it. So anyways, thank you so much for watching. If you like what you see, hit the subscribe button, join Movie Emporium, hit that notification bell at the top to find out what's coming next, and of course, comment below on any videos you watch on my channel. Otherwise, we'll see you on the next decade, guys. Peace out. What's up, guys? Welcome to Movie Emporium's Flashback Reviews, where I take movies from the past, break them down, and tell you what I think about it. If you like what you see, of course, hit the subscribe button, join Movie Emporium, hit that notification bell at the top to find out what's coming next, and comment below on any video that you watch on my channel. So, I did the video Best of the Decade for the 2010s. I hope you guys really enjoyed that video. The reason I'm talking about it is because this movie I'm going to talk about is, of course, in my top 10 of the decade, and there's a reason for that. The only thing I can say is, if you haven't seen Whiplash, I don't know why you haven't seen it, because this movie is insanely incredible. It gives some bravado performances, is very stress inducing with a great payoff, but brings us a great up and coming, now one of the great directors of this generation with Damien Chazelle, who of course has done the great La La Land and First Man. And this is a great first movie for any director. Any director that can pull off this type of movie is something to behold and something to watch in the future. And I love this movie to death. And then on top of that, like I said, you have Miles Teller is giving a great bravado performance, and then you have J.K. Simmons, who's giving a career making performance that he won an Oscar for a reason as Fletcher. And I don't even know where to begin. I guess I'll start with the story of this movie because there's so much to talk about. But basically, we have Andrew Neiman, who is played by Miles Teller, and Andrew Neiman is very committed to drumming. He is committed to the point where it's his passion. He's very influenced by Charlie Parker, who's a famous jazz musician. But he is a guy that is going to push himself to become one of the greats. And as this movie plays along, we see that happening. But he goes to Schaefer Academy. I think he's like in his first or second year, and he's like in a low level band that kind of just plays music, that does certain performances and stuff like that. But he gains the attention of this character played by J.K. Simmons, who plays Fletcher, and Fletcher is known around Schaefer and as well as around the country as one of the great conductors in music. And he is a guy that is very passionate about the music that he plays, which is jazz. And he invites, Neiman to come play for him because he thinks he has potential. But the problem is, or not really a problem, the thing that happens in this movie is it goes from a kind of cool movie about a kid who's gonna, trying to achieve his, passion, to becoming a straight up horror film. This movie gets intensely disturbing and uncomfortable and stress inducing the moment Neiman steps into Fletcher's, what he calls studio. It's basically a classroom. And to see kind of what happens to Neiman, to see what Fletcher does to his class, to the drummers, to the performers, to the other saxophonists and stuff like that, is something out of a nightmare. I mean, to be pushed like Fletcher does to Neiman and the people in this movie is something that gives you just like, it just makes you scream in terror, because it's just who wants to be treated like this? Fletcher, J.K. Simmons' role is something truly unique and awe-inspiring to watch, because he is so scary in the way he pushes his students, the way he pushes them to perfection, that it becomes just like this, just heart race inducing, just like, oh my god, you're just like scared to even like look in directions. You watch these kids and they're just like heads are down, and then as soon as he says ready, they're like up here, and it's just like, and then to watch what Fletcher does to especially Neiman as he's trying to get the tempo at him that he wants. He throws a chair at him, he throws all kinds of stuff at him, he berates him, he yells at him. It's so scary and so just uncomfortable, but it's so raw and so good. And as bad as Fletcher really is in this movie, he is doing something to Neiman that he knows this kid's potential, and he is pushing him to points where this kid never thought he would go. And you were just in it, you were just watching it, and it's just such a great performance, and it becomes one of my great favorite performances of the millennium for a reason. But as you're watching Neiman start drumming, as you're watching how he's being treated, as you're watching him how he's kind of going down the rabbit hole of the darkness that is what he really truly loves, he is pushing people out of the way. For instance, Melissa Benoist, who plays Nicole, she becomes kind of the love interest in this movie. And they meet at a movie theater and they kind of develop a relationship. But the whole point of her character, and it's really sad to see, is to show Andrew that he is kind of a terrible person in a lot of ways, that he is willing to put everything underneath him to achieve greatness. And, it's a unfortunate, drawback to taking that greatness to the next level, is people push people out of the way. And the reactions that Melissa Benoist gives once Andrew Neiman's cocky nature of how he treats her and how he breaks up with her is truly heartbreaking and truly sad to watch. And I got to give credit for Melissa Benoist, who, of course plays Supergirl, for just giving that performance of, the girl who just like, she was really committed to something and she really believed in him, and he just kind of treated her like garbage. And it's really sad and depressing to watch, but it's a great performance. And then of course we have Paul Reiser's character who plays Andrew Neiman's dad. And I think it's part of what drives Andrew Neiman to do the drumming that he does, because his father kind of really doesn't believe in his drumming. He believes more in his other sons who are like football stars and, you know, going to be politicians or whatever they're going to be. And it really shows in the dinner scene that how much Paul Reiser's character doesn't really care about what his son does. And there's a great payoff at the end when he finally, you know, understands how committed, how great Andrew Neiman's character really becomes at the drumming scenario. But it really brings back into to these two characters and how much, you know, the pushback of Andrew Neiman, the push forward of Fletcher's character really pushes us into some really kind of great kind of just star making territory. And when you just see the eventual conclusion, you know, after everything's just kind of come to a head, you know, because Fletcher's basically just kind of like putting him down and tearing him down and trying to build him back up. The way he's doing is so scary that when Andrew Neiman just kind of blows, he's gotten to a point where he's basically pulled away from or pulled to the side by a counselor, or I don't know who it is, but they basically say, you know, you can get this guy fired because there was this kid who basically hung himself because he was depressed and he was antipsychotic or psychotic because of what Fletcher did. So that gets Fletcher fired. There's a few months to go by, and then Fletcher and Neiman run into each other, and Fletcher's like, I need a drummer because the other drummer sucks. And basically, he invites him to play for this jazz company trio. And when he gets there, he realizes that, you know, Fletcher has basically screwed him over. So the first song plays out. Andrew Neiman doesn't know what to do. He sounds terrible. And J.K. Simmons Fletcher thinks he's got an upper hand of Neiman. But then the next song plays when Andrew Neiman just kind of says, screw you. And he starts playing the song. It goes into one of the songs you hear throughout the movie. And it kind of brings to the light, it kind of brings to the conclusion that Andrew Neiman really has proven himself to Fletcher that he is truly going to be one of the greats. He goes into a drum solo. And the one thing you see out throughout the movie is the drum solo kind of shows you the overarching like drive that Neiman has, because you see him drum solo a lot in this movie. And you start to see Fletcher's eyes kind of light up. He starts smiling. He starts realizing that the big fu, the big screw you to Fletcher is really Neiman finally coming to grips, kind of understanding what Fletcher was trying to do all along. So then it returns from a horror film into a inspirational, just there you go. That's the payoff. And that drum solo is everything. That is what this movie is coming to. And that's what makes this movie just on a whole nother level of not only movies in general, but of why movie making and why movies are special to begin with. Because you need those payoffs from, I mean, you could have a whole horror story, but you need that payoff. You need that kind of cathartic moment to kind of push it over the edge. And that's exactly what happens here. And that's why this movie is just, it's a whole nother level of filmmaking that, you know, I consider one of the best films ever made, period. It's such a great performance. It's such a great movie. And J.K. Simmons, I've said it already, J.K. Simmons is just, he also did the short to Whiplash, and you can see, and even in the short, how good, how committed he is to doing this role. You can probably tell that J.K. Simmons has really bothered him to do it because it pushes him to dark levels. Let's look at Heath Ledger in The Joker. That pushed him to like extreme dark levels, extreme dark areas, and it cost him his life, unfortunately. But these types of performances and why they're considered some of the great are for that reason, for actors committing to the role, to willing to do something to that role, and to willing to push that role forward to something truly special. And he won the Oscar deservedly for it. And then Miles Teller is giving a performance that is, you know, occupying that or kind of bouncing off that. And to think of the levels of darkness he had to go to, the levels of commitment he had to go to. I'm sure he drummed a lot. He was committed to performing, and it really shows the authenticity of all the drumming to the way everything plays out. It's a great film. It's a special film. It has great performances. And like I said, Damien Chazelle obviously knows music very well. You know, I think he did a music like short earlier in his career. I think it was of some sort like that. But you look at this and you look at La La Land, which I'm going to talk about eventually, and just Damien Chazelle just really knows how to get that feel, get that art, get that moment, get that style, get that substance out of like stuff that could be mundane and benign, and it just really is a beautiful thing to watch. And he has this patented thing where he'll focus on one character and he'll tap the back. You actually see it in the making of in La La Land. He'll tap the back of his cinematographer or cameraman, and they'll shoot over to the other character, go back and forth. And that is such a great scene because you're watching the two characters like go back and forth and see how they're playing, and it really shows you the commitment of everything. But Damien Chazelle is just, his level of just how he committed to this project is fantastic. And this, once again, I'm gonna keep saying this till the day I die. This once again proves how good of a producer Jason Blum is, because Blumhouse Entertainment, which is known for mostly doing horror films, was one of the producers on this film, and he probably put a lot of stake into this film, knowing that it was a great project. He probably, when Damien Chazelle did this short for this, he probably watched it. And he's like, "This could be an amazing film." And of course, Jason Reitman, who actually I think may have wanted to direct this at one point, he's also an executive producer. But this movie it's insane. It's great, and it just gives me goosebumps every time I watch it. And it's a movie that is so special that you just kind of have to watch it for yourself. You have to be just like, you have to be in the mindset, because it is a movie that can break you in half, but it is a movie just it's whiplash. I mean, I don't even know what else I can say about it, but it's fantastic, and it's one of the great movies of the decade for a reason, at least in my opinion. So, but there you go. That's my take on Whiplash. I hope that was convincing enough for you to watch it. If you haven't, definitely watch it. So, if you have watched it, please comment below what your take is on it. If you don't like the movie, that's perfectly fine. I know most of you probably do love this movie. So, anyways, yeah. So hit the subscribe button. Join Movie Emporium. Hit that notification bell at the top to find out what's coming next. And we'll see you guys on the next video.
What's up, guys? Welcome. Oh, okay. Give me 1 second. I figures that would happen. You guys don't want to see that. Figures. Hold on. I'm coming. Hi, everybody. See my my lovely self. Okay. I'm gonna restart the stream because apparently it's not working with me too well. I'll be right back.